Hello, hello. This is Alex Burkett, co-founder of Omniscient Digital, the content marketing agency that is difficult to pronounce, but easy to work with. And you're listening to the Long Game podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Sam Chapman. Sam is the director of content strategy and brand experience at Aprimo, which delivers industry-leading marketing automation software and digital asset management technology designed to help enterprises optimize how they govern and grow their brand. In this episode, we cover a wide variety of topics, including, at the start, how Aprimo is thinking about their newly launched podcast and how that fits into their broader marketing scheme. And then later, how content is approached more generally at Aprimo, how it fits into the whole customer journey and concept of marketing there. We talk about the concept of content cataloging, which is relevant or related to data cataloging, and being an information diplomat, which I love that word. And finally, the big struggles of creating thought leadership content in this space. We're also both from Austin, so we talk about the most underrated tacos in Austin, obviously. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Sam Chapman.
We actually just today launched our podcast. It's called Marketing Cheat Codes, and we're like 10 episodes in, and we launched the first 3 today. So,
oh, that's cool.
I've been immersed
involved in that, or like, what's your role in doing the podcast?
Yeah, so it's my team is the content and creative operations team, and so our CMO is the host. I kind of do a co-host, so like blurb in the intro and the outro, but it's all just like content marketing leaders. And it's based on the original concept of a cheat code, which is, designers and game developers in the 80s that wanted to repeatedly test their creations. So jump to the level, give endless lives, all that stuff, to just battle test over and over to make sure it's the best experience possible. So we thought of that's a great concept for marketing, because the people we're talking to, they've been in the trenches, whether it's demand gen, content, growth marketing. They've all got something that they've developed over the years, kind of this programming that got them where they are. And so we talk, and it's kind of designed to be more about like you consume it on your commute, 25, 30 minutes, and just great conversations, everything from content ops, the use of video, digital asset management, customer experience. There's a lot of great topics and people you've heard of, and from Austin, from content marketers. So it's a really good lineup. Marketing consultants. We just launched though, so it's exciting.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
What was the thought process going into the ideation process for the podcast? Like, why did you wake up and say we need to do a podcast? Like, what's the goal of this?
Well, it's interesting because like some of the notes I'd prepped is just like the thought leadership angle and how people want to consume thought leadership these days. The whole concept behind thought leadership, it comes from that more, I would say, more of the old guard PR world, where it's like bylines and place posts, but we want to just get a forum where it was open, and we by hosting that and enabling that forum, that kind of positions us as kind of like a platform for thought leadership. And again, it's not us pushing our thought leadership necessarily. It's showing that our network of call it influencers, if you will, is robust. They want to talk about. We never talk about Aprimo or our products. We'll talk about the space we're in for sure, because that's our audience. But it was really born out of the kind of like a way to really spark a new approach to our thought leadership as we're trying to get it off the ground as one of our core tenets of content marketing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned 2 things there, which is the building out of thought leadership in that format, and then also the work with the partners. And I found that with doing our podcast, it's awesome for both of those things. So one, bringing people in it's so much cooler to be invited, and you can disagree with me here, but I feel like it's cooler to be invited onto a podcast than it is to like do a guest post for my blog or something like that.
Absolutely.
It's so much less effort. It's like a real conversation that we're having. So now you kind of enter like a Omniscient's little universe here that we're creating in our media, and you guys can create something similar with your podcast and your universe. Also, just out of a sheer practicality, I just feel like it's way easier to do thought leadership in this format. Like it's so hard to sit down and predict what people are going to resonate with, spend a couple of weeks interviewing the right people, putting together the kind of clickbaity headline, and actually getting attention. But then you look at the effort to reward, and it's like, oh, I spent 4 weeks creating this piece of content, 2,000 people read it. Whereas like, I spent an hour on this podcast, and it could be the same thing.
Yeah, that's 2 points that I have listed to make. Is actually one, this forum, whether you do that, doesn't have to be a podcast, but just getting someone either in a room, on the phone. One of the biggest inhibitors to decent thought leadership is one, time, and then two, the confidence of the thought leader that actually has something in there that's buried maybe, or they're too close to it that they need to get out. And your job as a facilitator, as an elicitor of their ideas, is to just put that, like, get comfortable, coax it out of them. Not everyone's a great writer, not everyone has the time. So those two things, and then the effort, what you mentioned is, in content marketing, as you know, the whole like elusive ROI that's long and always asked for, how many impressions do we get? Like, what are my vanity metrics this month? Like getting past that to say, well, what's the return on the effort that went into this piece? So I can know before 6 months, 7 months, that if it was worth my team's time to produce, right? I think those two things go hand in hand, especially with thought leadership.
How does the podcast fit into your other content marketing efforts? Do you repurpose this into articles, tweets, LinkedIn threads? Do you use it as fodder for ideas to promote other content? Like, how does it fit into the overall ecosystem?
All those things, as it's a novel concept for us, and as it just launched. But yeah, every episode I'm sitting there listening in, I'm taking notes, getting ideas. And then, of course, we're building this like corpus of actionable thought leadership that you can listen to tomorrow and say, that's a great idea. I'm going to go grab that and put it into play. It's the thing that I love about real, genuine thought leadership is that it's asking for nothing in return, right? We're putting this out there. We actually want you. So, the people that I follow the most on social media for work is people that are out there just giving it away. And that's kind of in this new, the information economy, and just like the crushing sheer weight of, big content, the amount of content out there. If you're asking for something, if you're getting too transactional, I'm not going to listen to it. You're not going to listen to it. You're not going to sift through it. It really needs to be, in a way, it needs to be this bi-directional relationship, because as a content marketer, this, we know a lot about our audience. We know what to expect. We know that tactics are changing. They're shifting from B to B, B to C. The lines are blurring, right? But they need to know how to engage with us. It's like governing dynamics for content marketing. We assume that both actors on either end are not going to change, right? But that's our job to actually be open, honest, transparent about the things we produce. So it's not, in a word, bullshit.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting point, because I think one framework that I look into for content creation is that a piece should be, I think it's entertaining or useful, and ideally both. And that's like the pinnacle of good content. But it's like, that's true in a blog post, that's true in an ebook, but it's particularly true when you're competing on the same platform as other consumer. You're like, your podcast is standing right next to Serial or whatever the crazy addictive like true crime podcast is. So when you look at it like that, like I can't really be guarded. Like, there's got to be some unique value, and of course there's going to be some percentage of the people who use podcasts for more educational, more career focused stuff, and like that's probably going to cater them towards our direction. But then there's Gary Vee, and like there's very entertaining people on this app, as opposed to like when you're competing on just blog posts. So you almost have to unleash the transparency and value at a higher level, and like reduce. It's like the ratio of friction to value has to be even more in the favor of value and even less on friction in this medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Like any consumption has to be frictionless. And that's going to be part of the strategy. That's why it's like, keep it conversational, do some limited direction going in, but keep it open, because I'm sure you found doing this that when conversations are allowed to kind of ramble and meander, that's when you get to, and this is why I like setting this format up for, if you're, running your corporate marketing thought leadership program and you want to distill this kind of, more conversational information, setting this up as just your tactic to go beyond the SME interview, right? Like, like set it up in a casual, open way where you can really like foster a conversation that you just grab the transcript and you're off to the races. I will
say that when I do these interviews, like the coolest shit that happens is stuff that I could never have predicted ahead of time. Like if I just sat down and wrote a list of questions, like I almost never predict what the most interesting thing is going to be. But that open format, I think there is a downside in that coming on as a guest, it's a little more intimidating, as opposed to like, I don't know if you've been on podcasts like this where they just give you the 5 questions you're going to get asked and you literally just get asked those questions. So I still haven't, maybe you could tell me like what one is more enticing as a guest to come on. Cause I could see it both ways where it's like, personally, I've never had fun on those podcasts, but then at the same time, like there's a lot more certainty. And I know that like, it's going to take me 25 minutes. Like I just have to prepare these questions and I just get it over with. Right. But it does feel like it's going to be more transactional and less fun. So I don't know. What's your,
well, it comes down to perception? your personality type too, right? Like if you're a planner, if you've got kind of more of the gift of gab and you can just get into it. I'll plan for something, and then usually what I've learned, you plan for it and the plan doesn't matter. Or if you didn't plan, they're going to be like, here are the 5 questions I'm going to ask you. And you're like, well, all right, let's think. And it comes off as kind of like forced, or you're thinking there. And then I remember like one of the first ones I did, I was after the fact, it's like, yeah, that wasn't very good. Right.
Have you learned, I know it's still early in this process, but have you learned anything from launching the podcast so far? Has anything surprised you?
In terms of impact, yeah, it's too early, but initial response, just like internally, people see this as, we're out there, we're doing something. It's very well produced. We've got a great team behind it. And it's a morale booster for sure. But then just the engagement we're getting from our network, our influencer network and community has been really strong. And that gives all of us that are in marketing, finding out how to use ideas, how to create new ideas, saying like, if you're sitting there thinking, I'd love to do a podcast, but it's just this whole thing. It's technology, it's guests, it's, what's the episode structure? What's the run of show? Like it's actually, it goes back to kind of like the Quentin Tarantino advice on filmmaking. You just make the damn thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's been kind of inspirational, and also just getting through it where we just chipped away at it each day, each week. And then when you hit that kind of critical mass, that momentum, you're like, wow, we've got a show together. So early days, I think that's the achievement itself, how it looks, how it's coming together, the quality of production. It's a big win.
It's an interesting point. I've noticed this with ourselves at our agency. We always have to tell ourselves, all right, the first draft is not going to be perfect. We just have to ship something.
That's
right.
We'll
get the feedback and we'll go back and iron it out as we go. Otherwise, we never end up shipping anything. And I think podcast is particularly an intimidating medium. It's a newer art form. There's a lot of like audio technology that goes into this. There's editing, the song, the artwork, all of that stuff. But the same could be said for anything. It's like starting the agency, it was very intimidating because it's like, who do we hire? How do we do cash flow? Like there's just a million things, but you just take the piece that you can, that's right in front of you, and kind of like the details fill in, or like you get people to help out with those specific things. So it's usually a little less intimidating once you just like do the first step in front of you. Right.
Well, once you get comfortable with progress over perfection, right? And that's also just like within the world of like leading content operations, content marketing, that 70% best, that progress, you find it's additive, it's sticky, it's infectious, right? As you progress, rather than kicking something back into post-production, into another review cycle. And it's not saying we're satisfied with just okay, but progress over perfection. I feel like, especially with a larger team, or even smaller teams, right? You don't have the time or the resources. You've got to just march things along. That's, for me, that's going to be, I'll opt for progress every time.
Yeah, I'm such a fan of that model. I should take a step back and ask, what does Aprimo do, and what do you do?
Sure. Yeah. So Aprimo is in the content operations page, which is digital asset management. It's marketing resource management, so budgeting, planning, and connecting that through project management, productivity management. So end-to-end unified content operations. So from the whole cycle of content, the whole content life cycle, from the ideation to delivery of the experience. There's automation. There's ways to kind of like cut out a lot of the work about work, if you will. And also just ensure things like brand compliance, getting experiences to market faster, enabling localization and geographical expansion, and also with some of our customers, compliance is a big issue. So life sciences, pharmaceutical, financial services, where the cost of not doing something right is, and that's when perfection is required.
Warranted.
So yeah, it's really it's kind of a system of record for all of marketing to build experiences, and we like to think of it as composable content operations. Brands can come in and really build a dynamic experience engine on our platform.
That's cool. So is the end user going to be somebody like a marketing ops person, or who is the real persona? And I'm sure there's several, but
yeah, it's pretty broad. Because like within the point products of the platform, there's 3 areas. So you could use, if you're familiar with more of like the productivity management, yeah, it's going to be marketing ops, creative operations management,
project managers,
VP of creative, but also IT marketing, like the whole, like it's very much the heart of your tech ecosystem and how it's designed. When you're going through that auditing process, you're like, well, I already use a bunch of this other stuff. All these other, my MarTech stack is extensive, and you don't want to throw that out. You want to make sure that integrates, that creates kind of like a harmony across your tech stack. So the open integration, the ability to use and work with what you already know because of the connectivity, that's a big part of it as well.
Cool. And then your role, how do you fit in, and what's your day-to-day kind of look like?
So, I run content strategy and brand experience. So my team is, thinkers, doers, makers, designers, and, messengers. Just we're there building the story, creating the experience. We're like, to give you an idea of where we're spending most of our time right now, we're going through a brand refresh and a tear down rebuild of the website. So we're all deep into like, how do we redefine Aprimo for the next 4 to 5 years?
Oh, interesting. So there's definitely a whole kind of web strategy and brand experience side of this. And then it sounds like you're also heavily involved in creating media assets, podcasts, maybe the blog, maybe some public relations stuff. Is that also
we're
kind of
deep into it? I come from the old school of content marketing, where I remember, I can go back to, early days, started out journalism, professional writing. I wrote for a think tank after grad school. And then as all of the newspapers around the country started to crumble and go online, I was like, well, this marketing thing, this content idea is pretty interesting. But back then, people were hiring for it, but they didn't really know exactly what they wanted out of it or what it could be. So it was PR, asset management, website, SEO. And then of course it was just throwing, hey, you do that, right? Here you go. Like anything with the written word, anything with an image was kind of coming my way. So I've built my career on knowing that, like where all of that intersects, in terms of strategy, in terms of outcome, in terms of how it can be aligned to the business. And that's the other big thing, is you're probably seeing given that you've got an agency built around it, more and more companies are seeing content as a strategic rather than just an execution play. So treating content as a product or service rather than a bunch of people that are creating pretty things and words, and they've got a task list and their heads are down. They just better bang this out.
It's amazing that you touched on that, because I've worked in the CRO and experimentation space as well. And it seems like right now in both experimentation and in content marketing, the world is changing and people are actually understanding the value and how to approach these things. Because in the past, when we first started, even like 3-4 years ago, when we first started doing content and content consulting through the agency, we had a lot of people who would ask like, hey, can we do a couple test blog posts? We want to test content marketing, or like, hey, we